stood at the far end of the polished mahogany table, her posture rigid, her blue uniform crisp, and her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was a weather specialist, a weather weenie, as they were affectionately, or not so affectionately called. Her world was isobars, jet streams, and the chaotic mathematics of atmospheric pressure. The men seated around the table, however, lived in a world of bullets, bravado, and black ops. The topic was the rescue of Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant, eccentric glaciologist who had been kidnapped by a separatist faction deep in the no-man's land of the Taylor Valley in Antarctica. And the separatists, a rogue group of former intelligence operatives, had fortified themselves inside a labyrinthine research station carved into the permafrost. They were holding Thorne for ransom, demanding a list of political prisoners be released. The window for a rescue was narrow, a matter of days, before the polar winter made any flight or ground movement impossible. The mission parameters were a nightmare. The target zone was a bowl of geological chaos, surrounded by towering peaks that channeled wind like a funnel channels water. The rescue team would have to be inserted by a low-altitude, high-speed MC-130J Commando 2, but the drop zone was a sliver of ice between two sheer cliffs. The planners had presented 3 potential weather windows over the next 72 hours. Each one had been approved by the Air Force's 14th Weather Squadron. Melissa had spent the last 48 hours doing what she did best, obsessing. She had pulled every piece of data she could find on the McMurdo Dry Valleys. She had cross-referenced historical satellite imagery with real-time feeds from polar orbiting satellites. She had run her own high-resolution models on a terminal in the back office, models that the squadron's mainframe, focused on the bigger picture, had smoothed over. What she saw made her blood run cold. The official forecast called for a period of relative calm, a sweet spot of 20-knot winds and acceptable visibility. But Melissa's granular analysis showed a ghost, a katabatic wind event. A gravity wind was brewing on the polar plateau. It happened when super-chilled, dense air pooled up on the high ice sheet. When it reached a critical mass, it would spill over the transantarctic mountains like a waterfall, accelerating as it fell, turning from a breeze into a screaming, ground-hugging torrent of snow and ice crystals, moving at over 100 miles an hour. Her models predicted it would hit the Taylor Valley not in 3 days, or 2, but in less than 18 hours. The official sweet spot was, in reality, the calm before the apocalypse. Now, standing before the operators, she felt the weight of their collective skepticism. Lieutenant Commander Miller, a naval special warfare officer with a jaw carved from granite and a stare that could flake rust, was running the briefing. He pointed a laser at a topographical map projected on the screen. Insertion at 0200, 2 teams. Alpha will secure the perimeter. Bravo will breach here, through the maintenance hatch. We'll be on the deck for no more than 30 minutes. Exfil will be hot, right back to the DZ. Weather is a go. He clicked to the next slide, a standard weather summary. Winds at DZ 15 to 20 knots. Visibility 5 miles. Temp -40 with wind chill. It'll be a picnic. A ripple of dark chuckles went through the room. These were men who thrived in the cold. They trained in it. -40 was just a number. Melissa felt a bead of sweat trace a path down her spine. She had to speak. It wasn't in her nature. Her job was to provide the data, not to interpret it for men with far more stars on their collars than she had years in the service. But the data was screaming. "Excuse me, Commander," she said, and her voice clearer than she felt. The chuckles died. Every head turned. Miller's laser pointer froze on the screen. He didn't even look at her, just kept his eyes on the map. "Yes, Airman?" His tone was flat, dismissive. He was a SEAL. She was a weather observer. In his world, the chain of command was clear, and she was several links down. "Sir, with respect, the approved forecast is incomplete. My own analysis shows a high probability of a severe katabatic surge. It's a drainage wind originating from the plateau. It could hit the DZ as early as 2,300, 3 hours before your insertion. If you're on the ground when it hits, extraction will be impossible for at least 24 hours. Possibly longer. A heavier silence fell. Miller finally turned, his pale blue eyes fixing on her. He looked her up and down, not with lechery, but with a cold assessment of her audacity. Your own analysis? You're contradicting the 14th Weather Squadron's official brief? Melissa's cheeks flushed. Sir, the squadron's model is synoptic scale. It's great for the big picture, but for a specific valley with this kind of topography, the resolution is too coarse. The katabatic flow is a mesoscale event. It gets lost in the averaging. I've been running a high-resolution WRF model. A what? A voice interrupted from the back. It was a young Army captain, his smirk audible in his tone. Weather research and forecasting model, Melissa explained, her voice steady despite the growing heat in her face. It's a nested model. I've used local topography data from the USGS to create a 500-meter grid. The official model uses a 10-kilometer grid. It's like comparing a photograph to a mosaic. You get the general shape, but you miss the details. Miss the details, Miller repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. So, Airman, while the 14th Weather Squadron, with their decades of collective experience and millions of dollars of equipment, gives us a green light, you're telling us to abort because of a ghost story you dreamed up on your personal computer? The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't polite. It was the sharp, barking laughter of men who had stared down death and found it less intimidating than bureaucratic incompetence. They laughed at the little airman with the fancy computer model. They laughed at the idea of a weather girl telling a team of Tier 1 operators how to do their job. Check with your general, someone muttered from the corner, and the laughter intensified. It was a cruel joke. He's implying her authority was so low she'd have to ask permission to even speak. Melissa stood her ground, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their trembling. She looked past Miller, past the smirking captain, and her eyes landed on a figure sitting in the shadows at the far end of the table. He was older than the others, his hair a steel-gray buzz cut. He wore the subdued uniform of a naval officer, but the patches on his shoulders told the story. A gold eagle, the mark of a colonel, and a seal trident. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't even smiled. He was just watching her, his expression unreadable. His name was Colonel Mahegan, a living legend in the community, a man who had more combat hours than most pilots had flight hours. The briefing continued without her. Miller dismissed her with a wave of his hand, and the operators turned their attention back to the maps, the weapons, the logistics. Melissa was forgotten, a minor distraction. She retreated to a chair against the wall, her model printouts clutched in her hands, feeling foolish and small. She was just a specialist. They were warriors. Who was she to argue? As the meeting wound down, the men filed out, their conversation returning to mission specifics. Miller was the last to leave, pausing at the door. He glanced back at her, a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe pity, maybe annoyance. Airman, he said, stick to your charts. We'll stick to the fighting. He left. The door clicked shut. The room was empty, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the ghost of their laughter. Melissa gathered her papers, her shoulders slumped. She had tried. That was all that mattered. And she was about to leave when she heard a soft sound behind her, the creak of a leather chair. Colonel Mahegan was still there. He hadn't left with the others. He was sitting forward now, his elbows on the table, his weathered hands clasped together. He looked at her, and this time, his gaze wasn't unreadable. It was sharp, focused, and intensely curious. Airman Voss, he said. His voice was a low rumble, like stones turning in a river. Come here, bring your charts. Her heart, which had just begun to slow, lurched again. She walked back to the table, her knees feeling weak. She spread her printouts in front of him. They were covered in hand-drawn isobars, temperature gradients, and wind vectors. They were a mess to anyone else, but to her, they were a story. "Explain it to me," he said. "From the beginning. Forget the models. Forget the official brief. Tell me what the air is telling you." For the next 20 minutes, Melissa talked. She explained the formation of katabatic winds, how the dense air on the plateau built up pressure, how the topography of the Taylor Valley acted as a natural wind tunnel, how her model showed a specific pressure gradient that was the fingerprint of an impending surge. She pointed to satellite images showing cloud streets, long parallel lines of clouds that indicated a powerful, organized flow of air. She showed him the projected wind speeds, not 20 knots, but a sustained 60 with gusts over 90. She talked about whiteout conditions, where blowing snow erased the horizon and made depth perception impossible, turning a landing zone into a death trap. Mohegan listened without interrupting, or pointed questions. "What's your confidence level? What's 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 your confidence level? Pointed questions. What's your confidence level? What's the margin of error on the timing? What's the source of your data? She answered each one honestly, admitting the uncertainties, explaining the limitations of her equipment. When she was finished, she fell silent. Mohegan stared at the charts for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair, a sound like a sigh escaping him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a secure satellite phone. He dialed a number from memory. Melissa watched, her breath held. "Miller," Mohegan said into the phone. There was no preamble. "Abort the mission." A pause. She could almost hear Miller's sputtering protest on the other end of the line. "I don't care about the 14th Weather Squadron." Mohegan cut him off, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but it was a whisper that carried more authority than a shout. "I'm looking at the weather right now, the real weather. The mission is a no-go. We'll retask for a window in 48 hours. Get your team stood down. That's an order." He listened for another moment. Then he spoke again, and his voice was so low Melissa had to lean in to hear. "You know why? Because I just checked with my general." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Not a two-star general, Miller. My weather general. The one you all laughed at. She just saved your entire team's life. Now get it done." He hung up and looked at Melissa. And the hard lines of his face seemed to soften just for a second. He gathered her charts, stacked them neatly, and handed them back to her. "Good work, airman," he said. "Don't let the laughter get to you. It's just noise. The wind doesn't lie, and neither do you." He stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Melissa standing alone, her hands full of papers, her ears ringing with the echo of the colonel's words. She had been dismissed, but it was a different kind of dismissal. It was the dismissal of an equal. 23 hours later, the katabatic surge hit the Taylor Valley exactly as Melissa had predicted. It wasn't a gentle breeze. It was a freight train of frozen air. At the McMurdo station, 60 miles away, winds were recorded at 93 miles per hour, tearing antennae from rooftops and scouring paint from exposed metal. In the narrow confines of the Taylor Valley, the wind would have been even more ferocious. Any aircraft attempting a landing would have been dashed against the cliffs. Any man on the ground would have been lost in a white hurricane, unable to see, unable to communicate, frozen in a matter of minutes. The news traveled fast through the close-knit community of special operations. The mission was quietly rescheduled for a later safe window. Dr. Aris Thorne was successfully rescued in a subsequent operation that went off without a hitch, the weather holding perfectly. But the story that was whispered in the hallways of the Pentagon, in the hangar bays of Norfolk, and in the team rooms of Coronado wasn't about the rescue. It was about the briefing. It was about the quiet airman and the legendary colonel. But the story of how a room full of elite warriors laughed at a young woman, and how their commander, a man whose instincts were forged in the most hostile environments on Earth, listened. And whenever the story was told, the teller would always end it the same way, with a shake of the head and a look of grudging respect. They would remember the punchline that wasn't a punchline at all. They would remember the moment the colonel picked up the phone and uttered the phrase that had been used to mock her. "Check with your general," they'd say, a new meaning behind the words. The colonel checked with his general, and his general was a woman named Voss. They called her the Winter Siren after that, the one whose voice could call up a storm. Melissa Voss never became a pilot or a commander. She stayed a weather specialist, or a master of her obscure and vital craft. But she never again felt small in a room full of officers. She had learned that authority wasn't about rank. It was about being right. And in a world of supersonic jets and silent killers, being right about the wind was the most important thing of all. The laughter that had once burned her ears became a distant memory, replaced by the quiet respect in a colonel's murmur, and the knowledge that she had done her duty, not by following orders, but by following the truth.